Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar this afternoon. I'm Kim Young, Vice President of Business Development at America's Charities and the moderator for this program. We appreciate that so many of you opted to join us today. In my daily work, I hear from businesses and nonprofits about what keeps them up at night and when it comes to workplace giving and employee engagement, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today. We're diving into new employer donor research about their values and expectations and preferences around employee giving and engagement. We're excited to have such a diverse group of attendees from the corporate and nonprofit sectors, along with a few of our colleagues in employee engagement. Before we get started and before I introduce our panelists, a couple of housekeeping items we want to share. First, during the call, all lines will be muted so to give you the best experience to hear our panelists. However, we invite all of you to use the question feature in the menu bar to the right to raise any questions you have, and we will ask them on your behalf and without attribution for your confidentiality. We are also live tweeting today using the hashtag Snapshot 2017. So please join the conversation there also. And please feel free to submit questions via our Twitter as well. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the webinar will be emailed to you shortly after. Remember, please use the question feature to ask any questions. So let's begin. I'm pleased to be joined by our panelists, Steve Greenhaw, Senior Advisor to America's Charities, who also conducted the research, and also to be joined by Jim Starr, America's Charities President and CEO. In a moment, they will give you a preview of the snapshot findings. At the end of their presentation, we'll give time for questions with them, and we'll get to as many as possible. But if we don't, be sure to check out our blog at charities.org/blog, where we'll answer them there. So get ready to submit your questions. For those of you who are new to America's Charities, we are a nonprofit organization that inspires employees and organizations to support the causes that they care about. In brief, we partner with public and private sector businesses to facilitate workplace giving. We do this to bring more resources to the many nonprofits throughout the U.S. who are serving communities and changing our world. The Snapshot research series began in early 2000s. America's Charities, the leader in workplace giving and employee engagement, has surveyed nonprofits and businesses to monitor and report trends in workplace giving and employee engagement. The last 3 reports are also available on our website, and they are free download for your use. So just visit charities.org/trends. Between January and April 2017, America's Charities surveyed more than 1,500 employee donors from across the country to gain insight on what they value, how they make decisions about charitable giving and volunteering, and how their giving impacts their relationships with their employers. This diverse group of employees represent more than 18 U.S. industries, and we're really excited about that. Findings from this survey will be published this fall, and if you've not already done so, we encourage you to pre-register for the free Snapshot 2017 report. What sets Snapshot 2017 research apart from other employee donor surveys is that we have direct research to compare to side by side, apples to apples, to find out what companies think about their employee donors, what is true, and what nonprofits think about their corporate partners are true. This research really is groundbreaking in that way, and we're proud to share it with you. Just a reminder that this survey just closed, and we're still digging in to find the most salient data and facts that have meaning for you. Today, we're giving you a preview of those findings, but the full report in September will be jam-packed with actionable findings and things that you can use in your day-to-day. Over the years, businesses and nonprofits have used the Snapshot series as a barometer of sorts to set strategies to better engage their employees and increase their community impact. And we hope you will use it in this way too. So at this time, I'm going to hand off to Jim Starr to dig into the findings. And just as a quick reminder, please post your questions, and we will raise those questions at the end with our panelists. Thank you. Jim?
Fantastic. Good afternoon or morning for some of you today, and thank you for joining us. Looking forward to learning a little bit more from you guys also in terms of what your questions are as we go through a preliminary look at our Snapshot research, and I'm excited to have a little bit of a back and forth and conversation with our researcher, Steve Greenhall, about what we're finding. And really what we've done right now is we've boiled it down into 6 key findings of our research, and we'll go through each of these in a little bit more depth and highlight a couple of key points that we've learned from the data and what it's telling us. So first is, and I don't think this is a surprise to many, but that the workplace still has value. It's still delivering strong benefit to not only nonprofits, but also to companies that engage in the programs. And our companies are getting a boost in their employee recruitment and retention as a result of having these programs. Choice is still king. Technology is still expected. And the conundrum of communicating impact from nonprofits is still an expectation from employee donors and also a challenge sometimes for our nonprofits. And then lastly, what we have found aligns well with the research that we've done in the past on companies. So with that, let's jump into the first key finding, and that is that the workplace is still a strong avenue for supporting causes and is of great benefit not only to the nonprofits that are supported, but also to the companies and the employees themselves. What we found through our research with the employee donors who participated was that there is a strong prevalence of volunteering. In fact, nearly 60% of our survey respondents indicated that they volunteer time through their company, while almost half are donating dollars through their company's employee giving program. We've also found that employees place a lot of value on elements in which they can leverage their own personal gift with a donation or gift or contribution from the company. Essentially an incentive for engagement sometimes that companies offer. So things like providing paid time off so that an employee can actually volunteer, providing a company match, using a very user-friendly online platform that can be used to manage both the donation and volunteering experience, as well as also providing volunteer service grants or donations that a company would make to a nonprofit based on the hours that an employee has volunteered to that nonprofit. So employees are, really consider those items in that second bullet as key motivating factors for their giving in the workplace.
So Jim, I think the exciting part to me about this finding is I often get asked, is workplace giving dead? Donors have a lot of opportunities to give. They can go online, they can participate, through point of sale at their favorite, department store. And so why give to the workplace? Isn't it dead? Isn't it old-fashioned? I think we've answered that question. Not only is it still an effective conduit, it's great for nonprofits as a source of revenue that's sustainable and can grow, renewable. But I think it also, not only is it a conduit, it has the capacity to grow. Employees want to participate with their colleagues at the workplace. So what it means is companies, if they're having low participation or low involvement, they just have to look at what's the program, what are the elements, are they offering those things that you talked about on that slide, company match, technology platform, and so forth. So I think that's exciting that the workplace giving is still alive and well. The second key finding that we found was that employee engagement is a recruitment and retention strategy for companies. this is not new information. You know, there have been lots of research done that has shown that. But I think our findings is a validation of what's out there. It's a validation of those other surveys. What we found is that it's imperative. We asked the question in a way, as we said, is this an imperative or is it very important or down the scale? And 70% said it was either imperative or very important to work for an employer where their missions and values aligned, where the company was involved in causes or issues that were important to that employee. I like the second bullet where we found that working for a company where culture is supportive of giving and volunteering is also imperative or very important. So not only is the company known as a good socially responsible company, but is there a culture that encourages, supports me as an employee to engage through volunteering and service? Again, that workplace giving is not dead kind of component. And then it's not only important that the company support causes and stand for causes, it's important that the company allow me as an individual employee to give to causes and things that I care about. And obviously that's a great segue into the third finding, Jim, which you're going to talk about, is the whole concept of choice.
Right. So Steve, so having a program is important to get and keep talent, right? So will just any program do? Are there factors that are important to a program?
There are, actually. What we did is we asked them what factors are important in defining where it is you want to work or where you want to stay at work. And number one factor was, again, as we talked about, the alignment of mission and values. That was the number one factor. I think it's also interesting to point out that we had analyzed this by different age groups, and it did not vary. You know, we often hear this as associated with millennials. And what we found in this research is that crosses the board of all age groups. That's, again, followed by this corporate culture. Then another one is that senior leaders are involved. That is important. You know, our previous Snapshot reports used the word authentic involvement of senior leaders. It's not just, you know, it's important they say it, but they actually walk the walk, if you will. So yeah, those are key factors. And choice is also important.
Yep. And so, you know, not just any program will do. There are important aspects of the program that really do make a difference. And providing charitable choice is an essential component for both giving and volunteering programs. It's a hallmark of what we found in best of class engagement programs. And you can see the importance that our employees are placing on choice. Over 3/4 are saying that having that ability is imperative or very important to having a positive experience with that program. And in fact, if you start to kind of peel back of, you know, why do those who are not participating, you know, why aren't they engaging in the program? Why aren't they donating or volunteering their time? 30% say it's because they don't see their organization or their cause available to them. So employees want to support the causes. They want to support the organizations that matter to them. You know, all of us get asked by family, by friends, by others outside the workplace to donate. And what we're seeing is employees want to use the workplace as one of the avenues that they can respond to that ask. Because that may be their preferred way of giving. They know that it can lead to a larger gift. And so it's important for organizations to provide that choice. But you know, you got to be able to provide that choice easily, right, Steve?
That's correct. And that leads to our next finding, and that's the technology. And I have to say, this one surprised me. Of all the findings, this one surprised me the most. Because I think for so long, technology has been seen as kind of an administrative tool that, you know, the company administrator or, you know, senior leaders would look at. And what we heard in this survey, because again, we focused on workplace donors, what we heard is it's essential to having a positive experience, both on the donation side as well as on the volunteer side. And so what we found here is that 40% of employees say having an online platform that is easy to use is extremely or very valuable. And 50% say having an online platform is imperative or very important for a positive donation experience, so to make a financial contribution. And then 55% on the volunteer side say it's imperative or very important to have a technology tool that allows them to find volunteer opportunities, to register for a volunteer opportunities, to participate in that volunteer opportunity, and then after the event has taken place, to track their hours. So technology has moved from an administrative tool to help ease and streamline the management of a campaign to an essential tool for workplace donors and volunteers to engage. And they're looking for that technology to provide them with information. And I think we'll cover this a little bit later, but they want to be able to get information. They want to be able to quickly make a click, make a donation, sign up for a volunteer activity. So I think technology is moved beyond an administrative tool.
Yeah, so Steve, technology then it sounds like needs to be, more than just an easy-to-use donation vehicle. It's more than just an administrative tool, but what I hear you saying is that it also needs to be a very strong communication tool.
Absolutely.
And one of the aspects of a strong communication platform for your program is communicating information about the nonprofits. And what we're finding is that employees not only want but need information about the causes and the nonprofits that they want to support. But what we're finding, though, is that does present a bit of a challenge. Like all of us, and all of us as donors, we want to know that the organizations we're supporting, that our dollars are going to be used well, that our support is going to have some impact. And so there is an expectation on the part of employee donors, and this isn't out of line from any other donor, that they want to know that their support, either through their donation of money or donation of time, is going to have demonstrable impact. Yet our nonprofits, and this is from some of our prior research as well, said that it is actually kind of a challenge to demonstrate some of that impact. More and more are doing that. You'll see more things around, here's what $5 buys you, or what a $100 donation will get you, and are trying to do a little bit more about communicating, what is going to be delivered with a donation of dollars or time. But it is becoming an increasingly important aspect of the donation experience. And so making sure that your technology, or that you can leverage your technology to help communicate these charity stories and demonstrations of impact need to be an important facet of your technology tool.
Great. I think, Jim, you just alluded, and I'll continue with that conversation. One of the things that makes Snapshot unique is the fact that this is not the first report that America's Charities has issued. We have issued reports in 2013 where we went out and surveyed corporations and got their feedback on what makes for an effective program. In 2014, we asked the nonprofits, and that's some of the information that you just presented, is the nonprofit said, these are challenges for us. We know that our donors have expectations, and it's challenging sometimes for us to meet those, and how do we demonstrate impact? And then in 2015, we went back and talked to companies again. And then in 2017, we're talking to donors. So we're able now to compare information. And that's, I think, sets up Snapshot as being unique, but also allows us to make these comparisons. And we'll continue to make that comparison in the next section where we talk about alignment between company and employee expectations. Again, we surveyed in 2015 companies, and what they said to us is they said, we know that our employees want us to provide them opportunities to support causes and issues that are important to them. And we know that they want us to allow them to support and pursue their individual charitable interests. And so they said that. They understood those expectations. And yet, what employees and companies also said, that it was important for to provide opportunities for them to engage in the community. So what we found now is that employees have kind of validated that. And where we saw a little bit of a disconnect on the nonprofit side, where nonprofits recognized the challenges, but they weren't there yet. On this side, companies are cleanly aware of what their employees are asking for, and they're catching up very quickly. And so I think that leads us now to the conversation about, okay, what is it that motivates workplace donors?
Yeah, and that's a question that we get asked a lot. And so I want to put together a workplace program, and what are the elements that are going to drive engagement and participation, and really make it kind of an exciting program? Are there different factors that are perhaps maybe more important to others that will make for a successful program? Well, what we're finding is the increasing importance of volunteering, and making sure that the company's providing an avenue for employees to engage in their community through volunteer service. And we're seeing that more and more, particularly with, well, a lot of our findings cut across, all age bands of the workforce. The younger members of the workforce have grown up with an expectation of community service through the high school, through the college, and really aren't viewing it as a requirement, but just as the way that we do things and a way that we can give back. And having the company provide that opportunity, the easiest way is providing some paid time off that allow the employee to volunteer on company time, if you will, so that they can execute some volunteer service in their community. Remember, I think it was close to 60%, 58% of our survey respondents said that that's what they do. They volunteer. And about half, 46%, said that they contribute. They contribute dollars through their employees' program. And a big driver of that is having a matching gift program. And what's great about the matching gift programs is they can be as simple as you'd like to make them. You can put as much as you want or as little as you want into it. There is still, although you don't want to go too little because then it won't be of much value or a motivator, but providing an opportunity so that the employee feels like they're leveraging up their gift. And so if I'm making a $100 contribution, I know my company's going to match me. Maybe it's $100, maybe it's $250, maybe it's $50. And there's all different ways that you can align your program to the objectives of the company, and supporting causes that may matter most to the company itself, but still encouraging choice. We talked about the technology being easy to use. Quite frankly, that's just an expectation, and it's almost a basic requirement that it needs to be easy to engage with. I can be able to go onto the site, pick my charities, pick the amounts, and then kind of be done with it. Or if I want to revisit it later for a special campaign that the company may be doing, those kinds of things. Volunteer service grants, we touched on those earlier. Again, it's another way for the employee to kind of leverage up their contribution via their company. And by donating so many hours to a particular charity, then a financial gift or grant by the company can be made. And so that seems to be a high motivator for employee donors. And then lastly, and this is something that I know a lot of companies want to leverage, is providing that opportunity to essentially work with each other outside of the workplace to team build. And what we found in our research is that employees want to use these kinds of opportunities to work with or do something with their colleagues that isn't necessarily just kind of work related, and it's giving back, and it's another opportunity for that to take place. So these are the top 5 things that we found that really motivate employees to engage in your program.
And I think it's interesting. We did ask the question in the research, and one of the things they said to us is they want a technology tool that allows them to give how, when, and where they want. So that says a lot about the kind of tool that's offered to them. And I think this goes back to our opening conversation, Jim, about is workplace giving dead? Employees will respond if they have these things. They want to know the company's got some skin in the game, right? And the skin in the game is financial commitment through matching gifts or paid time off through volunteerism. So that's how the company demonstrates that. It's got to be genuine, authentic involvement.
Yep, and what's really kind of neat in terms of what's happening in the workplace giving space is it's transitioned from being company-driven or organization-driven to actually being employee-driven but supported by the company. If you want to maximize engagement, being employee driven is a great way to make sure that that happens.
Absolutely.
Well, great. Thank you, both Jim and Steve. At this time, we'll take a few questions, and thank you to all of our attendees for the questions that you're sending. The first question goes to about technology. So the first few questions we received are about the technology and communicating to employees. Is the expectation for an online technology solution to manage donations and volunteer service expected of the employer or the nonprofit? So where should the technology live?
So it's a great question, and it is one that does present a conundrum at times for companies. And in fact, we have this debate internally every once in a while. And really what it boils down to, I guess I'll answer this question in two ways. One is ultimately and ideally having a platform that integrates both the giving and the volunteering experience is what you want to strive for. It makes it easier from just a company administration standpoint to look at your impact as a company of both giving and volunteering. It makes it easier for you to communicate to your nonprofits or those that you may be partnering with your collective impact from that. It also makes it easier for the employee to go essentially to one place to manage both their giving and their volunteering. So if you're looking for kind of the ideal place to be, Kim, that would be it. However, and this is where we always have a little back and forth, is that sometimes a company's budget may preclude that from being a reality. And so then what do you do? Well, if we can't do the gold standard and what we know is what's best, should we do anything at all? And the answer to that question is, well, no, you can do something. And there are ways to make a program actually pretty effective, maybe not to that ideal standard of the fully integrated solution, but you can, for example, maybe you start with giving, and you can bring in a fairly straightforward economical giving solution. And then find ways to maybe manage a volunteer program if you're trying to do something around that, but you may not get as much data and analysis out of it. Or you could do it the other way. You can find a volunteer-only solution that can be economical for you, and then maybe do a matching gift program that's going to be a little bit more manual and have an element of that. But you can start someplace, and I think that's what's important, is to have a starting place. If you can't make that starting place the fully integrated platform, start with one or the other, and then you can grow into, you can perhaps then grow into a larger platform if that's where you want to go.
Okay, thank you. Great answer. Another question regarding technology, and this goes to how some of the nonprofits might be able to better communicate with donors. And we know that there's a level of anonymity with any technology solution that's provided or that a company might use in terms of donors. But we know also that nonprofit leaders want to be able to communicate with those donors. What would you say to that? What are some of the practices or things that they might be able to do?
Well, I can again tell you from just what we do. We work with nonprofits. We have nonprofits that are a part of America's Charities, and part of our service to them is we do help aggregate data and provide information to our nonprofit members of workplace giving programs. And one of the most, I will call it, increasingly frequent questions we're getting from our nonprofits is, hey, we'd like to have more information. We're only seeing partial data. So, we got a $100,000 workplace giving gift this past quarter from company XYZ, yet we're only seeing, 1,000 individuals on there, but we know that, there were more people that donated. Where are the other folks? And the other folks aren't there because the employee has elected to not share their information with the charity. And what we try to advocate as much as we can, and again, it comes down to employee's decision. We're never going to force something, but try to communicate the importance to the nonprofit of knowing who their donors are, it's not that the individual is going to get dumped into a mailing list. Smart nonprofits do not do that. But it's just that the nonprofit wants the opportunity to thank the donor, to provide some acknowledgement and a little bit of stewardship. If that particular individual is interested in learning a little bit more about what the nonprofit is doing, or perhaps other ways to engage, there's that opportunity to do so if that information is provided. But unfortunately, a lot of employees, in fact, the majority, are not allowing that information to be shared.
Kim, can I add to that?
Sure.
Because I think there's another part to this question.
Thanks.
The survey clearly said that in order to have a positive experience, either as a donor or as a volunteer, they needed information about the nonprofit. And so I would say to our nonprofit friends that are on the phone today, number one, they will research before they make a decision whether to engage with you either as a volunteer or as a donor. So make sure your website is clear and gives them the information they're looking for. And then don't always depend upon how do I get to that workplace donor. You need to be communicating with all of your donors, right? And so go where they are. You know, don't be adopt modern technology. Tweet. Have Facebook pages. Go to where they are, because they will do research before they make that determination. So you can't always give it through the workplace or through that online tool that we've talked about. We're doing all we can to encourage donors to release that information so they can. But it really is about making sure your communication strategies are very effective and very active and using multiple ways to communicate.
Great. Thank you both. We've got some affirmation of your answers that's coming through the pipeline right now as well. So thank you for those that are affirming Jim and Steve and what they have shared. I want to switch a minute over to the charitable choice side and go back to that slide for a moment. In that slide, it seems to indicate that choice is offered and that it's a standard. But is that true everywhere, or is that, is it what employees want? What would you say more about charitable choice?
Sure. Again, referring back to our previous Snapshot research, what we found, I think it was in 2015, is that choice was the norm now. At least in that survey, 93% of companies said they offered some type of choice. Now, what that means, we didn't dig into the details, but 93%, the question was phrased this way, 93% offer something in addition to the United Way only, because United Way has kind of been the key backbone of workplace giving for a number of years. So the question that companies have to ask is, how do they package that? Are they making sure that employees have an opportunity to support causes they care about as well?
Yeah, and what we're also finding is, particularly as we're encouraging companies to offer choice, it doesn't mean that they just need to keep it wide open. Companies should actually be featuring causes that matter to them. And most platforms and most programs provide the opportunity for a company to feature either a partner charity or a cause that's aligned with their CSR goals. And some companies will also prohibit certain types of charities from being selected for whatever reason. And so there may be certain cause areas that they're just not going to offer because they don't want to be associated with whatever that might be. And so sometimes there are restrictions that are placed on the types of organizations that will be allowed in the workplace giving program. But there's still ample choice that can be provided even with some of those restrictions.
And employees have said to us, they don't mind suggestions of place to give. Heads put some causes in that are important to the company. I think employees see that value. And so that they're not opposed to that. It doesn't mean it's one or the other. You can have a balance of both, right? And just to the restriction comment, I agree. There are some companies that place restrictions. Most often those restrictions come in if corporate dollars are involved, if there's a match. Right. And so companies have to be very careful about that.
Yep. Exactly.
But choice is important, and there's a way to achieve that balance.
Great. Thank you. For those of you who are sending questions, keep them coming. We do have a little bit more time. To Jim and Steve, here's another question, and this goes to managing volunteer engagement. So how do you manage or speak to this culture of volunteerism from the bottom up?
So I can share a little bit from my previous experiences as well. And, can you repeat the question so I can get a little bit of better?
Yeah, so to give you a little clarity, so many times volunteer programs are directed by the company or what the company wants to do, but there's a lot of organic growth. So how do you, if you want more employees to weigh in on those volunteer engagements, how do you create that culture?
Bring
that to life from the bottom up, from the employee up.
Yeah, so with anything that you're trying to nurture and bring up, bottom up, there is a little bit of organization and structure that you need to provide to that. If you have people that are managing your program and kind of a coordinator level, making sure there's an avenue that those kinds of opportunities can get put into your platform. Some platforms allow employees to create opportunities on their own. And recruit fellow employees to that. So it really, the answer to that question really depends upon the culture of the organization and how comfortable it is in direct employee coordination versus having something that may be a little bit more structured or goes through a coordinating element to make sure that it gets put in place. But again, technology can be an enabler for allowing those things, both for the creation of them, as well as for the promotion of them, as well as for the administration of them. But it really is going to be, dictated by the culture of the organization.
And Jim, if I might add to that, because one of the things that jumped out to me as I was going through the results of the Snapshot 17 research, is that employees still don't want to be coerced or pressured into giving or volunteering.
Yep.
And so there's that balance between allowing employees to engage, supporting company objectives, but at the same time not making it mandatory. Or in the volunteer world, we say voluntold. They were voluntold. And so I think we've got to be careful with that. I really liked your comment about allowing employees to suggest a volunteer project or letting departments or teams go out and do volunteer projects. Because one of the great incentives for volunteering at the workplace is to be engaged with your colleagues and your peers. And so if one of the first things people want to know is who else is going, right? And so if my friend's going, if Kim's going, then I want to be there because Kim's going, or if Jim's going. And so let them know who else is going, and then let them suggest activities, and then remind them it's an opportunity to be with their peers. And then it will kind of grow organically. Let the employees become the champions. Let them talk about it. They're the ones that are talking about the program. Word of mouth is still the best motivation and incentive.
Absolutely. And I want to build on that a little bit, because I think this question it speaks to motivation and what really motivates employees to give. This question is, what does the data say, or what are some of the differences between millennials and other generations regarding the top donor motivations? What do you see across these generational lines?
I'll take that, since I probably looked at the data more. Interestingly enough, as I said earlier, it didn't vary across generations. As the only time we found some differences, and these were slight differences, were in the types of organizations that employees wanted to give to. Older tended to give more to health issues, younger tend to be more animals and kids, and environment. And so, but otherwise, we didn't see a whole lot of significant differences around motivation. It was across the board.
And so, Steve, when we look at kind of some of the generational differences, and I don't know if there's a lot of empirical data to back up some of the observations that I've seen and seeing more and more with respect to the generational differences, is that the younger generations aren't as focused on particular institutions as they are on the cause, whereas the older generations are more focused on a particular institution or a nonprofit itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Outside of this research, I've done focus groups, and that's what people tell me, is they're more inclined to support the cause, less importance on the organization that's doing that cause, right?
Right.
And so that can present challenges for some nonprofits who are very well known, their brand is very recognizable. People are more interested in the cause, and that is true. And that tends to be more with the younger donor and the younger volunteer.
Great. Couple more questions. We've got a few that are rolling in, and we want to, again, thank our attendees for the questions that you're providing. This question goes to, again, some of the distinctions between what we see in the private sector or for-profit environment and the nonprofit environment. What are some of the differences between for-profits in employee giving and nonprofits and employee giving programs or engagement programs? So there's a bit of a language barrier, and we've talked about this amongst ourselves, but to share with the audience, what are the perceptions on both sides, and what are some of the distinctions between the two that we see, or similarities?
So in terms of running a program within a nonprofit, is that the nature of the question?
So what kinds of differences are there between the for-profits with employee giving programs and nonprofits? So maybe giving rates are similar at nonprofits or for-profits, or
Okay.
What do we see
in
terms of that?
Right, that's an interesting question. And it's interesting with workplace giving programs that are within the nonprofit, that the nonprofit is running.
Mm-hmm.
What we've seen is that sometimes the participation and engagement rates aren't as high as you thought they would be.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is because the employees may be supporting other causes that perhaps the nonprofit's not interested in supporting because they'd like to have themselves supported.
Mm-hmm.
The other is many that work for nonprofits believe they are giving quite a bit back to their employer because of the number of hours and everything else that they're contributing to it, and are looking to diversify their own personal contributions to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those is through their employment, and then the other way is going to be through how they volunteer and how they donate. That's not to say, though, that a program cannot be successful in a nonprofit. We actually run a couple of programs for some nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we help structure those is to help provide some incentives for supporting the employer organization, the nonprofit, but also making sure that there is an avenue for choice. It's what we do here. We do our own employee giving program here at America's Charities.
Mm-hmm.
As well. And so you just have to be a little bit more thoughtful about how you kind of structure it, and making sure that you can maximize the engagement while also bringing a little bit more value back to you as the nonprofit itself. You don't have those issues, obviously, with the for-profit or the private sector employer.
Great. Thank you, Jim. And I think we have time for one more question that's just come in, or maybe one or two. This is, how should a company find the balance between pushing corporate fundraising or their internal corporate fundraising programs? And this might be a corporate foundation or something like that, or a company that has a foundation, and volunteer initiatives, and supporting individual employee efforts. So how do we strike that balance between corporate and employee-driven?
Employee choice?
Employee choice.
Well, it goes back to what both Steve and I had said earlier. It's designing, the best way to do that is to provide some of these incentive programs for maximizing engagement, matching gifts, volunteer service grants, those kinds of things, and structure them in a way that will drive engagement into the featured cause areas by the company. And so perhaps you have a matching gifts program that perhaps is only limited to those cause areas that the organization wants to support, or it provides a higher value of gift matching-wise, to those particular cause areas. You can leverage your technology and feature those, on your platform so that they have a little bit more visibility. And you can do that, but you also need to communicate. There's still choice. You don't want to bury that message that, hey, we're going to hammer you with messaging around these 6 charities, and you get matching gifts for these 6 charities, but you never mention the fact that there's choice. Not so good. You still want to make sure that you're communicating that. Steve, what have been some of your observations?
Yeah, I think you're right, Jim. I think it is possible to achieve that balance. The other thing I would just add, and this may sound so simple, but it's often forgotten, is I always encourage companies to just listen to their employees. Talk to their employees. When they're establishing a program and identifying cause areas, talk to the employees. And is there a way to insert causes that are supportive of employee interests as well, right? They don't have to all be the corporate causes and so forth. So I think I would agree with that. There are ways within the technology, within the programs, to offer incentives. I've seen companies offer a double match to certain cause areas versus 2-to-1 match versus a 1-to-1 match. So there are ways to do that. But I just think it's important to, as you create your program, make sure you're listening to all your constituencies, your C-suite, your senior. The other thing I would add, and I think it goes back to what we found in previous Snapshot reports, it's all about authentic leadership. Is the company saying we want to support these causes, or is there a message that says we want to have a culture where we're working together, employees and the company, to address community needs?
Great. I think that's wonderful, and I saw some of that when I was in the corporate sector as well. One add-on to that question: do you find that companies have a concern about the company initiatives being buried in this or becoming obsolete? Not something that I saw, but from the CSR leader's perspective, that has to drive these company programs as well and has to support the corporate goals. Do you think there's any caution to them about corporate programs becoming obsolete or anything like that?
I don't think so. No, it really is. It's just a matter of finding balance. And as we mentioned earlier, we're seeing employee engagement programs, move more towards the employee-driven factor. And we know that, as Steve mentioned earlier in the research, people don't want to be pressured. Mm-hmm. People want choice. People want to be able to organize volunteer activities. Those are all employee-driven aspects. And so I understand the nature of the question of, well, geez, if we're moving in that direction, what about the company priorities? What about our CSR objectives, about where we want to make sure our philanthropic motivation is being reflected? Is that going to get lost? And no, the short answer to that question is it doesn't have to. Right? You still have, the company is still the one supporting and driving the program, with hopefully a good bit of employee influence. But as Steve said, listen to your employees, see if there's something in there that can be a part of the overall, corporate objectives. The company can still frame out, these are the 4 cause areas, or 5, or 2, or whatever it is, or organizations that are important to us. These are going to be, our partners. You can still frame elements of your program around it, so it doesn't have to. It won't get lost.
I would add to what Jim has said, because I think he's very spot on, very correct. We've seen this evolution in corporate philanthropy, from checkbook philanthropy, where you're just writing checks and giving them to good causes, to more of a focus and alignment around education, or around community, or STEM, or something like that. I think it's just important that companies, and I know this is happening because I talk to a lot of companies that are designing programs, they're viewing their employees as a key stakeholder. And so one of their cause areas are, making sure that employees' needs are being taken care of as well. So I think that most companies I talk to are very, very sensitive to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found the same, and even what I hear in the day-to-day, it's very similar. Yeah. It's not an either or, it's both and.
Yeah. and companies recognize that employees are the greatest asset they have to address needs in the community, right? Employees can give and volunteer a lot more than the company can give away in corporate dollars. So they want to make sure they're providing opportunities for them to engage.
Great.
It's good for the company, it's good for the employees.
Great, thank you. This is great discussion. I'm really excited about this discussion. Final question, and before we start wrapping up, and this goes again to balance. A lot of questions coming in about balance. Do you think that presenting more choice and individuality in charity work will result in company-wide initiatives becoming more obsolete? So we talked about that, but piling onto that, how do we balance giving employees choice in between giving or volunteering? Between giving and volunteering, do you see one sort of overshadowing the other between achieving giving goals or volunteer goals? And where do you see the biggest impact?
Well, from a nonprofit perspective, the biggest impact is through the dollars and the donations. That is their biggest need, their number one need. What's interesting, though, is as you saw in the research, employees are more apt to volunteer than they are to donate. But again, like I said, the biggest need is on the dollars from the nonprofit side. They may not tell you that directly, but I will tell you that's what they're saying.
They told us that in Snapshot 2014.
Yeah.
They told us that.
Yep. So from that perspective, there is with respect to choice. I think the same rules apply for both volunteering and giving. You want to provide an element of choice. It really depends on the volunteering side. How do you want to structure your program? Is it something that you want to just make more company-centric? In other words, you're only going to support kind of those volunteer activities where you bring your employees together and you go out, you do a service activity, again, as a group, and it's kind of company-sponsored and company-driven and even company-organized. Or are you going to open your volunteer program to support the individual volunteer, the employee, perhaps even outside the workplace, and allowing them to take credit for hours that they're giving, at their kids' school or at their, the food bank down the street or wherever that may be, and supporting that through volunteer service grants or something like that. So it really gets down to what type of volunteering program as a company you want to have and how you want to direct your own resources and focus for that.
Great. Steve?
Yeah, I don't want to say one program is more important than the other, because I think there's a place for both, and you need to have both, right? Jim's right. The nonprofit says the things they value most are the dollars, right? But I would simply say in Snapshot 2015, what we found and the language that we used in that report was volunteerism is the on-ramp to full engagement.
Yes.
And so we know from other research that's been done outside of America's Charities research is that someone who volunteers are more likely to give. And so I would always give people an opportunity to get engaged through a volunteer program, and the dollars will often follow that.
Correct.
But again, I'm not saying one's more important. I think you have to have both, but don't be afraid of volunteering.
No, it helps establish that connection.
That's correct.
And what we know is people give to things that they have a connection to. That connection may be as loose as a friend asking them to give, or it could be that they donated a day of their time one day for that and kind of fell in love with the organization.
Yeah, fully agreed. And we're also seeing, and not reflected in this report, that some companies are still keeping their retired employees engaged, even in both giving and in volunteering.
Right.
So I think it's time now to wrap up. I want to again thank Jim and Steve for this wonderful conversation, and for all of our attendees on the phone, and for all the questions that you sent. If we were not able to get to your question today, we will address them through our social media as well as through our blog post. So please visit our blog and so that you can get that information. We will also, again, be sending the recorded webinar to you after this program. I know how busy all of you are, and so we appreciate you all being with us today and taking your time. We just want to say finally, just thank you to everybody. And if you're still wondering how to get engaged and still need a little bit more guidance, feel free to contact us. And so my information is, and America's Charities contact information is there on the screen. We're at charities.org contact. You can also reach me, Kim Young, at kyoung@charities.org. We're happy to help you in any way. Again, thank you, and this concludes our program.